are back with another episode of Coordinated Chaos. In this episode, we are going to be recapping what happened in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, as well as getting to the gambling preview and predictions for the championship week of the NFL playoffs as well. Let's get right into this thing. It was an absolute fun weekend, at least for me. Some fan bases, not so much, but it was a great weekend of football. Let's start with the first game that we saw on Saturday at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, whatever that was. Chiefs versus Jaguars. This game, man, it started off hot. Pat Mahomes looked like Magic Mahomes right off the bat. He was making ridiculous plays, getting tackled and throwing sidearm, throws, jump passes for 30 yards down the field. He looked like the absolute best form of Mahomes you could have seen. And then unfortunately, he gets his ankle rolled up on. He gets tackled from behind. The weight falls on his ankle from the outside and kind of, sprains it on the inside. Very unfortunate because it looked like it was going to be a classic Patrick Mahomes just highlight reel against the Jaguars in this one. And then that happened. And before this happened, it looked like the Jaguars were a little bit deflated because they saw what was happening on that field. They saw Mahomes being just the pinnacle version of himself. And I think they were a little bit down on themselves. They're like, man, I don't think we can beat this version of Mahomes today. And then that injury happened. He could barely put weight on it. He had to come out of the game. Chad Henne had to do a drive for him. He went back to get evaluated to make sure there wasn't any kind of broken bones or any real serious damage to that ankle. Comes back in the game, but is very limited. Obviously, he wasn't as much of a playmaker as he normally is, scrambling around and making crazy throws. But he eventually got the job done. But what happened there was the Jaguars, man, since they saw the fact that he couldn't really even put a lot of weight on his ankle there, they perked up. It looked like their body language was better. They're like, okay, I think we actually have a chance here, and they started to play better than they were in the first portion of that game where Pat Mahomes just looked like he was going to dominate. So the Jaguars, climbed back into the game. It wasn't as high scoring as I originally thought it was. I thought this was going to go on the over, but it ended up going on the under here. The Chiefs did not technically cover, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Mahomes just wasn't 100%. I think if he was healthy the entire time, he would have tore up that Jaguars defense the way it looked like he was going to before the injury occurred. So it doesn't really matter, though, I guess. The Chiefs got the job done. The Jaguars season ends there. They still had a great season. They are a few pieces away from being an absolute contender in the AFC for years to come. I think Doug Peterson is the right guy for the job. Trevor Lawrence is the right guy for the job. He was playing well in this game. They just need a few more pieces. Calvin Ridley is going to be on their team next year because they traded for him, but he was just, suspended for this year for the whole gambling thing, which I think is dumb in the first place, but it is what it is. But yeah, man, Jaguars are definitely stock up. They are looking like they're going to be competing in that AFC for, obviously, as long as Trevor Lawrence is in his prime, essentially. And I don't think he's going to go anywhere anytime soon. He's just getting better and better per game. He had some shaky games in the playoffs here. He had some shaky games at the end of the season. But at the end of the day, he has the tools and he has the coach that can coach these tools out of him. I like the Jaguars moving forward. The Chiefs obviously move forward going to the AFC Championship game for the 5th time in a row. Patrick Mahomes has been to the AFC Championship every single season. He's been the starting QB for Kansas City, which is just ridiculous. Brady didn't even do that. So we got to give credit where credit's due. Patrick Mahomes is an absolute monster. He is an alien. We have not seen anything like this. I know Tom Brady has 7 Super Bowls, and that's very impressive and whatnot. But Pat Mahomes has a chance to be, the greatest of all time when everything's said and done. I hope that his ankle isn't as limited that I think it's probably going to end up being in this AFC Championship game against the Bengals. But I can't bet against Mahomes here. I'm probably going to. I hate the position that this has put me in because I think with that limited ankle, I think there's going to be a chance the Bengals can pull this one off. But let's not get too far ahead here. Let's go to this next game, Eagles-Giants. This was a night game on Saturday night. I was in a unstable mental state before this game. I was just kind of stressed out. I really shouldn't have been, obviously, based on the results. But you just never know what can happen any given Sunday. It's the NFL. It's a division rival. Those games go crazy. So, but I should have known, man. In the link, The link was absolutely rocking, and the Eagles came right out. And I think, honestly, one of the biggest turning points of this game was the fact that the Eagles lost the coin toss. A lot of the times the Eagles like to defer to the second half and receive the ball in the second half and go ahead and kick the ball off to, the opposing team whenever they do win the coin toss. But they didn't, and the Giants deferred, which gave the Eagles the ball first. And I think this is a strategy the Eagles need to implement going forward. I think they need to get the ball every single time. Deferring is really nice whenever you have a lead, obviously, going into half, but that doesn't always work out. So I think it's best for this Eagles team, the way that they're set up, is to always receive first, go down the field, at least get 3 to obviously 7 points on the board on the first drive if possible, and put the pressure on the other opposing offense to match that energy, obviously. And with the way the Eagles defense is set up, they are more ready to go whenever the team is down and they can pin their ears back and get after the opposing QB. So I think that was the biggest thing. Obviously, like I said, the Eagles went straight down the field, scored a touchdown. Jalen Hurts looked like Jalen Hurts. Second play of the game, 30-plus yard bomb to Devontae Smith, which was a huge little get up. Everybody was like, okay, this is Jalen Hurts is back. Jalen Hurts did some QB runs on the first drive, just kind of setting the tone like, I am healthy, at least enough to get this done, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then the Eagles just proceeded to just throw points up on the board. By halftime, it was 28-0. The Giants looked completely deflated. They looked like they did not want to be there any longer. Ended up being 38-7 by the end of the game. The Eagles kind of let their foot off the pedal in the second half just because they didn't really need to do anything else. They just needed to essentially ice the clock out. So 38-7 was the final score there, which was very interesting considering the fact that it was on the anniversary, the 5th-year anniversary of the 38-7 game of the Eagles in the NFC Championship game against the Vikings. So it's really crazy how that happened on the anniversary, literally the day of, the night of. So really cool storyline there. But yeah, Eagles get the job done. They dominate, and you can't really ask for a better showing from the Eagles. They proved everybody wrong. Everybody was saying, oh, you know what? They ended the season pretty, poorly. It didn't look the same. Jalen Hurts is hurt, blah, blah, blah. They dispelled everything that everybody had said about them in the media the past, few weeks. And so they're looking very good rolling into the NFC Championship game. Let's go to this next game. We got Bengals versus Bills. I'm going to give a shout out here to my guy, Charlie. He's my friend, and he called me right at the end of this Bills-Bengals game. He said, man, the Bills blew it. You can't not have a running game in the playoffs and expect to win, especially in a snowy, cold, grinded out type game like they had on Sunday in Buffalo. And it proved to be absolutely true. He was completely right. The Bills' downfall was not having a balanced enough offense, and that comes from the fact that their run game was just very lackluster. I mean, Devin Singletary's okay. James Cook, okay. They drafted him this year. They traded for Nyheim Hines. I don't really understand. I was very confused about that whole thing because he's essentially the exact same type of runner as the first two guys. They really needed more of a power back that can get short yardage plays and stuff like short yardage first downs and whatnot, goal line touches. They needed a bruiser, and they traded away Zach Moss, who was a little bit more of that than Devin Singletary and James Cook, but Zach Moss wasn't very good either, to be honest. So I understand trading him, but getting a guy that was in the exact same body type as the other two guys never made sense to me, and that ended up being the downfall of the Bills. The Bills' defense was okay. Their pass rush could never get to Joe Burrow, and they were without multiple starters on that O-line. So that was obviously a problem. Without Von Miller, they didn't have a closer when it came to the defensive end area. They had no guy that could come in and actually finish a sack on Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was just doing whatever he wanted to back in the pocket with backups in there, which should not be the case when you're in the divisional round of the playoffs. You just can't give a quarterback of that talent that much time back there because he's going to carve you up, and that's exactly what happened. He had everything he wanted at his disposal, and he dominated. So Joe Burrow is an absolute boogeyman. He is scary, just like Pat Mahomes is. He just gets the job done, man. He's just one of those guys that puts his hard hat on and gets to work. And he got the job done here. Really, the Bills just couldn't get anything going on offense. It was pretty lackluster. Like I said, they couldn't really connect with Stephon Diggs, and apparently after the game he was very, very visibly upset. He left the locker room early and whatnot. Somebody had to go get him. So there's some tension there in the Bills locker room after this loss, as there kind of should be. Like, where do you go from here? I think I saw some tweets and stuff of people trying to explain, how this game went and why they lose, and why obviously they've been struggling a little bit in the last few weeks of the season. And people were pointing to the fact that they have not drafted a very, very good player on defense in a long time. They're all just very middle of the pack guys when it comes to Ed Oliver, AJ Epinesa, whoever you want to call it. Let's see, Gregory Rousseau. They're all just okay. None of them are dominant, and they're all first rounders. And so, the GM's kind of got to answer for that, because if you don't have any good defensive linemen and you just lose in the trenches, it's going to be a long day for you, especially when it gets to the playoffs. And that's where the game is won or lost in the playoffs, is the trenches. If your O-line, your D-line are good, you have a great chance. If that's not the case, you know what? It's gonna be tough sledding. So the Bills lose. Where do they go from here? It's going to be interesting to see what they do in the offseason. If they make some big time changes, I don't know what's going to happen there. But the Bengals, man, they look good again. Once again, like I said, Joe Burrow, boogeyman. Don't want to see him in the playoffs. But somebody's going to have to, and it's going to be the Chiefs. And they have the Bengals, and Joe Burrow have the Chiefs' number as of late, and you have a banged-up Mahomes who's going to be very limited going into this game. So the Bengals look good to be going back to the Super Bowl again, back-to-back years. Let's go to the next game, 49ers-Cowboys, the nightcap on Sunday. This game, obviously, I was just smiling ear to ear the entire game, man. I couldn't help it. Just knowing the Eagles are in the NFC Championship game, whoever wins this game is playing them in the link for the NFC title. And the whole time I was going back and forth trying to think, who in the world, as I'm watching this game, would I rather play in the NFC Championship game? Because both teams looked pretty shaky. They looked pretty bad. So Brock Purdy looked a little shaky. Once again, this is his second game in a row that he's looked shaky, but by the second half, he kind of found a bit of a rhythm. And that's at home. That's 2 home games where he's looked shaky starting out. So I can't wait to see what Brock Purdy has for us, being in the link where he's not going to be able to hear anything at all. And so I assume that's probably going to be the case again. But by the end of the night, obviously, the way I came down on it, and I'll get to more of the ins and outs of what actually happened in the Cowboys 49ers game, but this is just where I'm going with this right now. By the end of the night, I had talked myself into, I would have rather had the 49ers than the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game, specifically because I personally can accept if Kyle Shanahan and DeMeco Ryans throw pitch a perfect game against the Eagles in an NFC Championship game in the link. If the Eagles lose in this game, they must have absolutely just put together a masterclass, and the Eagles had nothing for them. And you got to just give credit where it's due at that point, if that's the case. I mean, if they win with a rookie QB, on the road like that, you just got to tip your cap at that point. But what I couldn't accept was a Mike McCarthy, Dak Prescott led loss on the road in the link. I just could not have that wouldn't have sat right with me. And because I actually respect, and I think Kyle Shanahan is one of the best play callers, if not the best offensive mind in all of football. And so if we lose to that, so be it. You know what? And they're going to have to, give the Eagles their A+ game in order to win this game, in my opinion. So once again, if they end up doing that with Brock Purdy, more power to them. I just couldn't accept the latter of the options. So that's where I'm at with that. But let's get back to what actually happened in this 49ers-Cowboys game. Like I said, both teams not playing very well. Brock Purdy looking a little shaky to start off. He was not expecting to be, hurried that much. The Cowboys defense played out of their mind. They played well. They held them to 19 points. If you hold a team to 19 points, you expect to win a game. To be honest, that's just the way it goes in the NFL. And the Cowboys offense could not match the defense energy. Dak Prescott throws 2 interceptions. We were thinking, the entire time they were in the playoffs, we were like, at some point, Dak Prescott's going to throw one of these picks, and it's going to be untimely, and it's going to make a difference. And that second pick where he threw it, going into the half, essentially. The Cowboys were about to go down there and score. I mean, they were, I think, probably in the mid 30-yard line-ish, going in to potentially score to, go in the half with a potential lead. And Dak Prescott throws a pick, and then the San Francisco 49ers were able to drive down, and I think they got a field goal out of that. So that's why it was 6-6 at that point. Then they made it 6-9 going into half. The 49ers were up. And, that was a huge turning point because the 49ers were like, man, we haven't played good whatsoever, and we're winning going into halftime. So that gave them a lot of confidence coming out. And I think Brock Purdy, I think the one thing that turned the tide for him was that pass down the middle to George Kittle. That man hauled in an absolute great catch. I mean, the throw was just a little bit off. It's still a good throw by Brock Purdy because I think he was kind of like drifting left. He threw it a little bit across his body like that. And George Kittle, bobbled it a few times and almost got destroyed by Trevon Diggs because he went in there with his shoulder. He didn't really look at George Kittle, which is funny because that's what he does when he tries to tackle. And it's kind of sad that he's like Dion, but like worse, obviously, because he's not Dion. So like the fact that he's just not willing to really tackle is pretty funny to me. But yeah, so George Kittle hauls in that huge pass. And I think from that point on, the 49ers go down, they score. And, the momentum was just all over on the 49ers at that point. The Cowboys looked out of sorts, especially after the fact that Tony Pollard gets hurt. Comes out that he actually did, fracture his tibia. So that was a huge loss. I mean, he was a huge part of their offense, especially in the first half. So him not being there, it was just Zeke at that point, and Zeke is just not as explosive as he used to be. And so the Cowboys really just had nothing for them at that point. They couldn't get anything going. They technically had a chance there at the very end of the game against the 49ers, and they run out in this formation. Well, first of all, let's get to the fact that Dalton Schultz, they throw a pass to him, and he goes out of bounds without going forward, and that is, the clock continues to run, so he didn't know the ruling there. The very next play, they throw it to Dalton Schultz again near the sidelines, and he nonchalantly just doesn't get his second foot down. He just thinks it's a routine catch, doesn't get his second foot down, so they don't get the yardage that they had there, and time came off the clock. Then they had 10 seconds or less on that last play, and they come out in that just ridiculous formation. Who in the world designed that? Ezekiel Elliott was the center, and they had all the offensive linemen to the right of the formation, and then they had a couple wide receivers on the left side of the formation. And they had Zeke snap the ball. Azeez Al-Ashir was over Zeke at that point, and he just ran at him and just pancaked him, just planted him into the earth, and then got kind of in Dak's face where he had to throw the ball, I think, earlier than he anticipated to Turpin, who is their kick returner / punt returner, who's very athletic and very fast. So it makes sense to get him the ball in that situation. They get him the ball, and he catches it and immediately gets tackled. I mean, it was one of the dumbest play calls I've ever seen in my life. I was so close to peeing my pants. I was just watching that thinking, what is going on here? And then I tweeted a second before they snapped the ball and said, somebody rush Dak Prescott. He doesn't have an O-line. I don't understand why there wasn't more than two people in that area, because I feel like they could have, as soon as Zeke snapped it, they could have gotten back there and essentially batted the ball. But Al-Ashir just went straight up the middle and destroyed Zeke instead of just going around him, which I think would have been even more effective, but whatever. It was really funny because he got planted into the ground, and he's probably going to sprout next spring. He's still going to be in Levi Stadium. But yeah, dude, just a crazy game. 49ers, advance. Once again, second year in a row that they lose to the Cowboys in an embarrassing, weird fashion. It's almost like the last play of those games always has to be a comedy skit. Last year with the Dak sliding situation, not having enough time to get up and spike the ball again. And then this year, just that ridiculous formation where it just did not work whatsoever. So, wild game, obviously. So now we have, let's just jump right into the gambling preview and predictions for the AFC Championship game and the NFC Championship game. We're going to go with the first, we're going to do AFC here. I know the NFC does play first on Sunday, but I just want to go ahead and get the AFC one out of the way. Chiefs-Bengals, this is a matchup we had last year in the AFC Championship game. The Bengals won that one, obviously. And it was a very close game, very good game. This one, man, it stinks that Mahomes is hurt. It really is, because I think his playmaking ability is going to be so limited to the point where Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator of the Bengals, is going just to have something perfectly called up for this, to where like he's going to have certain people in spots where he knows Mahomes is going to want to try to make plays, but he's going to be limited, so he's not going to be able to scramble as much. I'm so sad that this is the situation, because I live for these matchups. I live for the Pat Mahomes versus Joe Burrow, games that are just absolute classics. And so, unfortunately, in this situation, it is Chiefs -1. So it's essentially a pick 'em. I'm going to have to go with the Bengals, though. I just think right now, the way their offense is operating, the way their defense is operating, I think they are super hot right now. The fact that Mahomes is limited. I hate betting against Mahomes because he's my guy. I love watching him play. But, man, at this point, I think the Bengals are just they're the hotter team right now, I believe, as well as the healthier team. And that's crazy considering the fact that, the O-line for the Bengals is so banged up, but that's just how much Mahomes' health is going to impact this football game. So I will go Bengals and the points, I guess, technically the one. So it's essentially just Bengals money line. So it is what it is, but I hate to go that way, but that's just the way I feel right this second. Now let's get to the next game. Eagles -2.5. Yeah, Eagles -2.5 versus the 49ers. I saw this line last night as soon as the game was over, essentially, and I said, go Birds. I got to go Birds here. Like I said, I think Kyle Shanahan, D'Amico Ryans, Brock Purdy, they're going to have to pitch a perfect game to get this job done in the link. It's going to be loud. It's going to be a very crazy environment for them to be coming into. The Eagles obviously just dominated, so their confidence level is at an all-time high. It's obvious that Kyle Shanahan can scheme something up to absolutely screw the Eagles defense. I can see it happening. But like I said, it's going to have to be a perfect game plan for them to do it, because the Eagles offense right now, even though the 49ers defense is fantastic, it's just the element of Jalen Hurts right now. He is, as much as I said, Mahomes and Joe Burrow is the boogeyman, Jalen Hurts is also a boogeyman, straight up. Because you can't be right playing defense against this offense. It's just the fact that the RPOs, he can run. He can hand it off to Miles Sanders. He can then throw a slant to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, throw a little flat route to Dallas Goedert. It's just, you can't be right. You got to pick your poison with this team, and they can beat you in any ways. I'm scared of players like Fred Warner, because that dude is I call him the Predator. That man is crazy. He is so physically gifted that even if he is wrong in one of those RPO exchanges and he picks the wrong player to go run after, I think he still has the physical ability to go then find the guy that still has the ball and run him down as well. He is that good. He is great in coverage. We saw that against the Cowboys in the divisional round when CeeDee Lamb went straight up the seam and Fred Warner hawked him down and got the pass defense. He's just an alien. So that stuff scares me. Their linebacking core is what scares me, because the Eagles do like to use the middle of the field, but it's not like they can't use, the sides of the field or like outside the numbers. Jalen Hurts has been very good this year, throwing bombs down the field to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. They have weapons. It's going to be very difficult to beat the Eagles at home. And so I got to go Eagles in the points here. I will take them essentially to win by a field goal, and that's just the way I feel right now. And I'm really hoping all of this happens, because months ago I got tickets to the Super Bowl. And so there's a lot riding on this. Obviously, we are going to be in Arizona no matter what. If the Eagles don't end up in the game, we will end up selling the tickets essentially and just being around the area as the game, occurs. But I am really hoping we don't have to go through the hassle of trying to sell those tickets. And I really hope the Eagles are in this bad boy, because that would be just a once-in-a-lifetime thing for me. Obviously, we thought 2017 or 2018, whatever you want to consider that, was, the pinnacle. That was it. And I was on the couch at home. I was more excited than I've ever been in my life, but if I can go physically to a Super Bowl for the Eagles, that would be incredible. So obviously I'm rooting for that. Obviously I'm an Eagles fan, so that's the way I'm going to go. But I truly do believe the Eagles are going to win this game by at least 2.5 points. So that's where I'm sitting at for the NFC and AFC championship games. I really do think the Bengals and the Eagles are going to match up in this one, and we'll see what happens, man. We'll be back next week, obviously, after or probably the Monday after the Sunday games, the championship games, and I will talk about what happened in those. So I appreciate everybody tuning in and listening. Please subscribe to our YouTube. Follow our Instagram, our Twitter, our TikTok. Once again, shout out to my guy Weston for editing this bad boy once again, and I will talk to you guys next week. See ya.